about your hometown and surrounding area. Tiger Talk is brought to you by
Make the morning great with a stop at Whistle Stop Donuts on West Main Street in Princeton. Whistle Stop makes their donuts fresh daily, and they're ready on your way to work or school. They have a wide variety of fresh donuts, so you can surprise the office with a dozen delicious donuts. Stop by Whistle Stop today and enjoy a donut or a dozen. They're open 5 a.m. to noon Monday through Saturday. Whistle Stop Donuts on West Main in Princeton.
And good morning at 6 minutes now past the hour of 8 o'clock. Welcome to Tiger Talk, brought to you by Whistle Stop Donuts, Stream Beans Coffee House, Hancock's Neighborhood Market in Katie's, and Perry's Floors and more. Have the pleasure of welcoming into the WPKY studios Martha Pressler and Reverend Shannon Blosser of Ogden Memorial United Methodist Church. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good.
Well, it's nice to see you on this Monday morning. Everybody's bright and vibrant. And I've been reading about this now for about a week. We've had a kind of a press release from Shannon here. It's the 200th anniversary of Ogden Memorial United Methodist Church. That's an old church for around here, isn't it?
That is an old church.
But it's a good old church. And let's jump right in. It's got a rich, rich history, and you seem to know it well.
Well, you know, my heritage and my life are really wrapped up in Ogden. I feel very fortunate and somewhat unique in that I can say that 4 generations of my family were christened at that altar, found Christ, married, their children were christened, and there have been family funerals right there. So I really feel like it is my place to worship. Much of the information that I got about the history of Ogden is from the little book, The River of Years, that was written in 1954 by our pastor at that time, Joseph Leggett. We can start that the very first Methodist families to the Kentucky frontier settled near Danville, and they immediately organized what was known at that time as a Methodist class. And this initiated the Methodist movement in Kentucky. And this is sometime around 1783.
Okay.
Now, the frontier conditions, as you can imagine, were primitive. And Brother Leggett says that the moral and the spiritual conditions were really desperate. And this is probably one of the reasons for the phenomenal growth of Methodism on the frontier. You know, when times are hard, we seek God, and we need Him for our strength. In the year 1786, there was the famous Baltimore Conference, and at that time, a new circuit was created called the Kentucky Circuit. Excuse me. James Hall, who was older, and the very young Benjamin Ogden were the men who were selected to enter this new mission field. Now, Ogden was born in New Jersey in 1764 and was converted in 1784. And so he was about 22 when he came to Kentucky. He is noted to be very brave and was nerved by moral courage. He actually died in 1834 in Princeton and is buried out in Country Club Hills. It was during the latter part of his ministry that Ogden and Methodism came to Western Kentucky. Ogden United Methodist Church was organized in 1818 at the home of Richard Barnes, who was a tanner. And you have to understand that Princeton was established just the year before.
Right.
There's no record of any other organized congregation of faith at that time. And it seems that the initiative to form a church was made by Reverend Benjamin Ogden, who was riding the circuit in this area. And he is believed to have been a very frequent visitor to Princeton. The congregation thrived from the beginning, and shortly after the organization of the first church was built on South Jefferson Street to the north and very close to the viaduct. Actually, it would, if you were looking at it today, it would be that kind of back parking lot of First Southern Bank.
That's where the initial church was?
That's where the initial church was.
Okay.
Now, later, I don't really know when this happened, but I know my mom told me that when she came to Princeton as a war bride, that the parsonage for the Methodist Church was that white brick house that's across the street from First Bank.
I've heard that. It's got the little columns there in
right,
front.
That was the parsonage at that time.
And people used to get married there.
You know, I don't know.
That's actually historical within Kentucky of people going to the pastor's house and getting married. So that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I've heard it. It seems like I've heard stories about people getting married there in that house. So that might be a connection there.
I've heard that story, especially at older churches I've been at, of people going to the pastor's house, knocking on the door, and say, "Hey, pastor, can you marry us?" You know,
and they do it right there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, you know, I think that it should be noted that Ogden has always been a very community-minded church. And perhaps this started because as other denominations and churches were established and organized in Princeton, most of them came and worshiped in the Methodist building until they could erect a church of their own. In 1844, 1845 were very troubled times in Methodism and in our country. And the church split between the churches of the North and the South. And during this time, while many churches struggled during the Civil War, Ogden survived and continued to grow.
Was it part of the North or the South?
It was part of the
Emmy
South.
South.
It was just,
If you will go by the corner sometime, you can see that the cornerstone of the old church is it's there in concrete,
Right.
and it says Ogden, the Methodist Episcopal Church South.
Mm-hmm.
So,
because he had that name in there sometimes in some of the Methodist church, you had the Episcopal.
Yeah, I mean, the 1840 split was when we were still the Methodist Episcopal Church.
Yeah, right.
And so when we split over slavery, interesting, the story is that there was a bishop who inherited slaves. And they asked for him to be removed, and he refused to do that. And there was a conference actually in Louisville, and they decided to break away. And many of the churches in Kentucky went to Emmy South, which is the Methodist Episcopal Church South, and stayed that way till the 30s.
and it wasn't an individual choice of where we went. It actually, as Shannon says, the decision was made in Louisville, and you understand that we are a connectional church,
Right.
so we don't
There's
make
a bishop.
Yeah.
right. We are organized and connected to other churches, and so because that decision was made in Louisville,
Yeah.
That's where
Well,
you
that Louisville conference was actually for all of the Emmy South. That was the forming conference.
Oh, really?
And so,
So it covered
it covered pretty much what is now what we call the Southeast Jurisdiction, which is a regional body within the United Methodist Church, or the Southeast Conference, if you want to look at it in football terms. Most of those states ended up in the Emmy South.
And of course, we're talking about all this because you guys have a celebration coming up. We maybe should preface that a little bit. But on November the 5th,
Yeah.
I mean, you
We're
guys
kicking it off.
You're kicking it off.
Back to football terms.
That's right. And that's going to be at the graveside of Ogden. So that's kind of why we're going through this process. It's interesting and it's fascinating to get into a little bit of detail about these churches, because for something to last 200 years in this day and age, it's pretty impressive.
Yes.
Well, you know, one of the interesting things I think that we often forget about with these stories is that churches have history and they have memories and they have fruitfulness that bears out. Last church I was at was 150 and dates back to the Civil War. We date back to the founding of the Methodist movement in Kentucky. Those are stories that tell about the faithfulness of God and the faithfulness of God's people throughout generations.
And their bravery.
Yeah.
I mean, because really, to stand up for what you believe for, especially in certain times in our country, was not the best thing to do. You could get yourself hurt.
Yeah.
Well, in 1878, a new brick church was built on the west side of Seminary, which now you can think of as being across from Ziobro's. And it also was where the old Morgan funeral home was. Actually, brick from that church was used to build the old Morgan funeral home. And while this church was adequate for many years, in 1928, under the leadership of Brother Pat Davis, it was decided that we had outgrown that church, and a new movement to build a new church was started, and what was begun with a gift of $5,000 from George Kuhn, who you recognize from the library. George Kuhn gave this because his parents were members of Ogden. And so the present building was begun in 1928. My dad was a young boy at that time, and he can remember carrying hod to the bricklayers. He would have been 14 at that time. So it was an exciting time for the church to build a new church. He also remembered that before, at the old church, when we talk about having outgrown that church, his Sunday school class was a car in front of the church.
You're kidding.
That's what
and when you think about this, you talk about the construction in 1928, and those are large buildings for Princeton.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite an undertaking, and the engineering and how they were built, especially for 1928. That's pretty sophisticated stuff.
Well, you know what happened in 1929?
Yep.
The Depression. So there was a great struggle to pay off the indebtedness during that time. And the ladies of the church are credited for kind of making that happen by serving dinners and sandwiches at every opportunity to pay off the debt.
Wow.
The cost of the building was approximately $75,000. Actually, they served the Kiwanis Club.
Really?
And all of their work helped to pay for the church. The first service was held in July 1929, and there was still an indebtedness of $20,000. And this debt was retired in 1945. Again, much credit can be given to the ladies who worked tirelessly, and then there were some bequests.
And that tradition has continued because obviously there are meals served there every Wednesday. I mean, really, you guys are there with potluck meals about every Wednesday and have been for a long time, haven't you?
Well, we aren't doing that right now, but we have been. In fact, I'm sure that this could be argued, but we like to think that the best cooks in Princeton go to Ogden Methodist Church.
Well,
My waistline would agree.
So one of the quotes from this book is that the church has grown from a rude pioneer church to a church that's strong and victorious. And this could not have happened without much faith and devotion from its members. Then that kind of catches us up on our church buildings. I'm so lucky and fortunate to have such a perspective of the history of our church. One of the things, we lived right across the street, and I guess they didn't have a coffee pot at the church, because as I was growing up as a little girl, it was not unusual for the preacher to come over and get a cup of coffee and sit around our kitchen table. So I got to kind of know our ministers in a real personal way.
Because you grew up right there, and your house was right there across the street.
Exactly.
And there's not a single pastor known to man and woman that doesn't go for a cup of coffee.
No, that's exactly right.
Well, my mother always had a pot of coffee going. We had some important revivals during the years. This, my little River of Years book says that in 1916 and 17, there was the Great Culpeper Revival. And it was one of the most outstanding ever held in the church, and many people found Christ and became active in Ogden. Another great revival was during the years of 1949 and 52, and that revival was held by Reverend Comer. Now, I can remember that in the 1960s, we had a revival. Now, revival at that time wasn't a 3-day event. It was a 2-week event.
Wow.
And Ford Philpott came, and he had a team, kind of like a crusade. And later, when I was in college, I attended Centenary United Methodist Church with my sister, and that's where he attended, and I always felt really special whenever I got to see him at church. Yes. Barbara Brokoff was here twice during the late 70s, and one of my most vivid memories about a revival, when I was a little girl, we had this preacher, and he said if anybody would quit smoking, that he would fast. He would not eat for the rest of the time he was there. And sure enough, a man came down and laid his cigarettes right down on the altar rail.
And that was probably a time when it was the in thing to smoke.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. So
that took commitment.
He was staying out at Miss Pettit's house. And I spent the rest of that revival asking her, has he eaten anything yet? Has he eaten anything yet? I just couldn't believe that this guy was not going to eat for 2 weeks. So anyway, that was funny.
So the guy, do we know if
he quit smoking?
Well, hey.
But what about the preacher? Did we know if he ate anything or not?
I kept trying.
That's the more important question.
I kept trying to find out, but as far as I know, he didn't. Both of them kept their words. You know, when I was growing up as a youth, we had a large youth group, and we went to Camp Lucon, and it was newly built at that time. We had a group that went to Lake Junaluska in Maggie Valley, North Carolina.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It really was beautiful.
Do you all have conference centers over there?
Lake Junaluska?
Yeah.
Yeah, Lake Junaluska, it serves as the kind of the Southeast Bodies campsite.
Right.
And so serves as our jurisdictional conference, which for those of you unfamiliar with what jurisdictional conference is, that is where we elect our bishops.
Okay.
And so every 4 years, that's where we gather. And I'm always jealous because you get the photos and you get the massive lake and you get all the trees around. And so I want to run just so I can go to Lake Junaluska and just say, forget the election. I'm just going to go hang out and play golf.
Yeah.
But it's one of the treasures, I think, of not just the Southeast jurisdiction, but truly Methodism, just that we had this beautiful retreat center.
Yeah.
And even Camp Lucon, which is really just an hour and a half down the road, which is one of our camps, which is a beautiful retreat center for people to take advantage of.
No doubt.
We also, Susie Sears and I, represented Ogden with a group from the Louisville Conference, and there was a bus that started somewhere, but it picked us up in Princeton, and we went to the National Methodist Youth Convocation at Purdue University in Indiana, and that was spectacular. I have always been kind of just moved spiritually when I'm in a big group that sings together. I love that. And so this was, I don't know how many kids were there, but it was really, really well done. Of course, another thing, when we were in high school, we had what was called sub-district meetings. So the MYF once a month would meet at a church, and it was really probably in the Lyon, Caldwell, and Trigg County areas. Lots of little churches out in our area, and we would go and meet with other young people. And I think that all of this kind of helped me develop the pride that I have in just being a part of the Methodist Church.
Of course.
It's good to know that we're not just here by ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. There's a whole bunch of others out there doing,
connected.
Worshiping the same way, similar ways, same kind of theology, and it's awesome. And we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back. We got lots more to talk about, and we're talking to Martha Pressler and Reverend Shannon Blosser of Ogden Memorial United Methodist Church. They're having a celebration. It's their 200th anniversary. They're going to have an event on November the 5th where they're going to start and kick off, so to speak, this celebration at the gravesite of Benjamin Ogden, and that's out at Country Club Hills. And then they're going to have a time of fellowship and really kick off their celebration with this event. And we're going to talk more about that, as well as some more history and just the good things going on at Ogden Memorial United Methodist Church here in Princeton. We're going to take a short break and be back here in about a minute or so. You're listening to Tiger Talk here on your hometown radio station, WPKY. Hancock's Neighborhood Market on Commerce Street in Cadiz is the place to shop for delicious homemade goodness. Hancock's makes their own fresh chicken salad, pimento cheese, salads, and a variety of mouth-watering desserts, sure to please your entire family. While at Hancock's, be sure to visit their meat department for the best selection of USDA choice meats in the area. Hancock's Neighborhood Market in Cadiz, hometown, homemade goodness, and the Hancock name you know and trust for quality for your family. Hancock's Neighborhood Market on Commerce Street in Cadiz.
Since 1978, Perry's Floors and More has been selling, installing, and servicing homeowners throughout Western Kentucky with quality flooring and workmanship. Perry's Floors and More carries luxury vinyl plank and luxury vinyl tile, carpet, window treatments, and more. Quality brands like Mannington, Shaw, Tarkett, Beaulieu, and Flexitech. There is a reason why we say you can walk on our reputation. Come see Bill and Lucy at 127 West Market Street or call 270-365-9869. Bake the morning great with a stop at Whistle Stop Donuts on West Main Street in Princeton. Whistle Stop makes their donuts fresh daily, and they're ready on your way to work or school. They have a wide variety of fresh donuts, so you can surprise the office with a dozen delicious donuts. Stop by Whistle Stop today and enjoy a donut or a dozen. They're open 5 a.m. to noon Monday through Saturday. Whistle Stop Donuts on West Main in Princeton.
Hancock's Neighborhood Market on Commerce Street in Cadiz is the place to shop for delicious homemade goodness. Hancock's makes their own fresh chicken salad, pimento cheese, salads, and a variety of mouth-watering desserts, sure to please your entire family. While at Hancock's, be sure to visit their meat department for the best selection of USDA choice meats in the area. Hancock's Neighborhood Market in Cadiz, hometown, homemade goodness, and the Hancock name you know and trust for quality for your family. Hancock's Neighborhood Market on Commerce Street in Cadiz.
Since 1978, Perry's Floors and More has been selling, installing, and servicing homeowners throughout Western Kentucky with quality flooring and workmanship. Perry's Floors and More carries luxury vinyl plank and luxury vinyl tile, carpet, window treatments, and more. Quality brands like Mannington, Shaw, Tarkett, Beaulieu, and Flexitech. There is a reason why we say you can walk on our reputation. Come see Bill and Lucy at 127 West Market Street or call 270-365-9869.
And we are back here on Tiger Talk at 8:28, and we are talking about Ogden Memorial United Methodist Church, 200 years old, and they're having a celebration coming up, and it's going to kick off on November the 5th, and we're just hearing all the wonderful history of this church. And I tell you, there's something that always strikes me when I'm in there. Of course, you have a beautiful sanctuary, but the stained glass that's in the back, it's kind of unique. I don't know. You don't. I mean, I haven't seen. You know, you see stained glass in churches, but that particular one back there behind the choir loft is just beautiful. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, that was made by John Street.
Okay.
I don't know if John is still living or not. They moved. He was a pharmacist here.
Okay, yeah, I remember.
But it represents the Trinity.
Okay, that's right. I
If you look at it, it's all in threes, which of course is the Father, the Son,
Sure.
and the Holy Spirit.
Now, here's what's interesting about that stained glass. John Street's, the pharmacist was the one who created it. His son, John Street Jr., was on my Board of Ordained Ministry team. And so he was one of the ones that had a hand in me being ordained as a pastor. And so when I heard that story that his dad was the one that put that, the stained glass window in, I'm like, you're talking about things coming full circle.
Really. And it's just a beautiful.
He made another window. If you come in the Cave Street entrance, over that door, there's another stained glass piece that he made.
Okay, we left off, and we were talking a little bit about, the revivals, and then we kind of got into some of your trips in the Lake Junaluska. Where shall we go now?
Well, one of the things, as I look through this book, and I really have been focused on thinking of the past of our church, I could not help but remember the tireless, dedicated, committed members and workers that we have had through the years. Nothing is going to last if you don't have that kind of commitment and dedication. There's so many wonderful people in my memory that were my Sunday school teachers, my MYF leaders, the choir directors, just the people that were a part of the church. And I'm fortunate that I can remember them. My sister says, she told me one time, you remember the strangest things. And I do have a lot of kind of strange memories, I guess. But one of memory, one of the biggest things that happened when I was growing up is that Ogden hosted the Louisville Annual Conference meeting here in September 1952. Now, you have to remember, in 1952, I don't know if there was a motel. There certainly weren't very many restaurants. And all these people, like 500 people, came. And, of course, as I said, we lived across the street. So
how many did you cram in your house?
I don't know, but I know the bishop stayed there.
Okay.
And that I was a little girl, but we were made to know that he was very special and important, and we better stay out of his way. I can remember the only time my dad ever took us to the picture show. He took us to just get us out of the way, I'm sure. But my mom would fix breakfast for him every morning.
For the bishop?
Yes.
Okay.
And he ate in the dining room. And, it was...
it was a formal kind of affair, I guess.
It really was... It was important.
Important, sure.
And it says in my little book that the church members and the people of Princeton served 2 meals a day to 500 delegates in the basement of our church. Wow. So I'm sure the town helped us get that. And, and they must have stayed all over
Isn't that
the
interesting
place.
About how, I know several people, I know you were a little girl, but yet you have memories of it. Can you imagine? I mean, I've been in that basement with 150 people, and there's a lot of people down there.
Yeah.
Now, surely I'm sure they rotated in and out of there.
Yeah.
But, boy, that's impressive.
Well, on a personal note, my dad, the conference also met here in 1929, and my dad was, he would have been 15 years old. He gave the opening address in 1929, and he did again
At
in
15?
1952. Yes.
Wow.
So in fact, I have his somewhere in my cedar chest. I have what he said. I have it. He kept
You have
it.
the actual notes?
Mhm.
Oh, that's neat.
I do. Now, in the about 1980, actually, we hosted the Louisville Conference United Methodist Women's annual meeting, and I was very involved in that. And I can tell you that we utilized every square inch of that church. I know we ate in every room, I mean.
Sunday school rooms and everything else, yeah.
But these big events, they really brought our church together, working together for a common goal and a purpose, and it was a good feeling, a good time.
Yeah,
Of course.
I mentioned one other thing that I wanted to mention about when I mentioned my dad. My grandfather was very, very active on the district and conference level, and he actually was a delegate to the Uniting General Conference when the Methodist churches of the North and South united.
Yeah.
And he had a discipline, that's kind of the rule book of the church, and the delegates from the Louisville Conference to the Uniting Conference all signed the front of the book. And those signatures were names like Roy Short, who became a bishop, and just names that were familiar. And a few years ago, I donated that book to the Methodist Church Archives at Kentucky Wesleyan. I was so pleased that they would want that, and I was like, why should this be in my bookcase? It needs to be someplace where it is treasured. It can be treasured. I've always been really proud of how community-minded Ogden is. From the very first, when it opened its doors to the other congregations of Princeton, we've sponsored a Boy Scout troop for years.
They've been down there a long time.
I think it's Troop 87.
Yes,
it is.
Yes.
And they've been there, and even now, the Girl Scouts meet there. In the 1970s, the BPW Club met there for our monthly meetings, and the ladies of the First United Methodist Church cooked our meals in the kitchen so that the ladies from the First Church could make some money. And the Kiwanis Club met there for years.
And
the
pancake
breakfast has been there for many years. And I don't know if they met there very long, but I know when I was in high school that I was in a trio that sang for the Rotary Club when they had a banquet there.
All right.
DAR has met in the basement. The Caldwell County Free Clinic has had their volunteer appreciation dinner there. Yesterday, we presented 25 handmade quilts to the Caldwell County Health Department for their HANDS program. The Western Kentucky Regional Blood Drives have been held there. And just a few weeks ago, or just last week, I guess, we had our community-wide fall festival when over 200 children and adults.
Saw that. That was looked like quite a successful event.
Yeah, it was. With the weather, it was bad. We were expecting heavy winds and rain, and we still couldn't turn them away. It was awesome. It was awesome.
Great event.
Yeah.
I say that we welcome them, and we do this. There's no charge for people to use our facilities. And, of course, there are some costs that go along with that in terms of utilities and janitorial services. So we're happy to welcome others into our
It's a nice space.
community. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a very nice space. I know that as you plan, tell us a little bit about what's upcoming with this 200th anniversary celebration, because it sounds like it's going to be a very, very nice day.
Yeah, we've got a whole, really about 5-6 months of great events that are coming up to really honor what you've heard of a great story of God's people and the love of God that has been shown through this church. Starting off on November, see if I can say it right, November the 5th. It's Monday. Preachers don't talk on Mondays. But it's November the 5th at 2 o'clock, which is, we're going to gather, as you've heard, at Benjamin Ogden's gravesite. And what's great about this event, it's All Saints Day, or All Saints Sunday. And as we've been talking, as we've been planning, one of the things I've been focusing on is that we stand on the cloud of witnesses that have gone before us as we think about where we're going. As a church. This is a period for us at Ogden where we're asking some important questions of who are we and what does it mean for us to be the church in a community, in a changing time, in a changing community. But that's going to kick us off. And then we move to April 22nd. Put it on your calendar. It's a long way away, but April 22nd.
Before we know it.
It will be here before you know it. Basketball season will be over and everything else. But April 22nd, we're going to have Bishop Leonard Fairley, the Kentucky Annual Conference. Great man, great speaker. I love this man to death. He is going to be here as we celebrate our 200th anniversary in worship. Just a dynamic speaker. You will not find, I think, in our denomination today, a more powerful speaker. And so we are fortunate that Bishop is coming and will be with us on the 22nd. That Saturday, I believe it is the 28th, we're going to have a day of caring where we're going to go out as a church and go out into our community and do various things, various mission projects, helping out with various organizations, helping out in people's homes. And so we'll be starting the planning of that pretty soon. And then in May, on Pentecost Sunday, which is also, ironically enough, with where the calendar falls, is also Heritage Day in the United Methodist Church. It's the day that we recognize John Wesley's strange heart warm moment that he had his conversion of faith, a deeper evangelical faith as he was preaching. We're going to have just a Heritage Day of singing some old Charles Wesley classics and just have a good day of worship. So we're excited. This is a great time, not just for us at Ogden, but really for the entire community to come alongside and remember the stories of the church, how the church has impacted the community, how we have helped to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world here in Princeton. So we're excited.
Sounds like a wonderful, wonderful celebration that you have planned. I'm sure there'll be more things to come. It's interesting, when we first come out, we were talking a little bit about Benjamin Ogden. Let's kind of go back a little bit. You were talking about circuit riders, how Methodism and the Methodist Church kind of. Let's talk a little bit about what that process was like. I think that's a great story of how these churches were founded and how these congregations would get going in the pioneer days.
Well, really, if you think about preaching today, and not just the United Methodist Church, but all churches, you have a pastor that stays, primarily in one church, and sometimes in two. There are some churches in our area that are what's called 2-point charges, and that's the closest that we have today to what a circuit would look like. My first appointment was a 2-point charge in Central Kentucky, and what you would do is you would start at one church, and then you would go to the next church, and then you would do the same service. But back in the 1700s, 1800s, as our nation was founding, and as the American Methodist movement was really getting going, there was not a lot of pastors that were ordained to take care of the elements of baptism and of communion. And so the circuit riders would come and they would set up a church, formulate a group around, and then they would go to the next church. And then they would do the same things, and then they would go to the next church. And they would have about 4 or 5, maybe 6 churches on their circuit. And as they would arrive at a church, that would be when they would do communion, baptisms, and things of that sort. And then they would leave. And then it would be up to the lay people to do the care, to do the ministry, to do the mission.
And to keep it going while he was away. Yeah.
Which is really what, is our hope of pastors. That's really what it should be about, that it's not pastors alone. It's the whole church coming together to do the mission. And so the circuit riders, they would take their horses. They would go across all types of weather. There's an old joke that the weather is only fit for post people and Methodist pastors.
Yeah.
And so
that's how it worked.
And it worked. And so you go to Asbury Seminary, which is where I went to school, and you've got some great pictures, portraits of some of what that would have looked like, and especially with Francis Asbury, who was one of the first 2 bishops in the United States, along with Thomas Coke. Yes, you put Coke and Asbury together, and you get Cokesbury, the old bookstore. And so, just a great time in our church's history, yes.
Great
those guys, they weren't faint-hearted.
No, lots of adversity,
They were brave and courageous and strong, and dedicated. Yeah. To live a life like that, they were committed to Christ.
No doubt about it. But you have to be. If you're a Christian, that's what you have to do. And so, we're all kind of in this together. And it's interesting. You have this wonderful book that was put together, I think, in the 50s. You said
1954.
54. And then you have, your family. That's what's neat about a lot of these. Especially the older churches, you have families that have just generations and generations after generation are here. The book was actually dedicated to your grandfather,
my grandfather,
and then your great grandparents. Picture of them are in there as well. So just a
they
rich
came
history.
to Princeton they moved to Princeton from my great-grandfather parents moved to Princeton from Lyon County in 1900 and joined Ogden and became very active in the ministry there. He worked in the tobacco warehouses.
Okay.
And my dad said that he remembered him smelling like tobacco whenever he would get in his lap. One of the things that, I've talked about my place at Ogden. I've always felt like my place was in a certain seat in the choir loft.
Uh-oh.
Because
Notice no one says the preacher's chair.
I have an interest. It was just a story about how I got in the choir.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Well, I was about 12 years old. I can remember because my sister was still in school, and that was her senior year. And I sat in the balcony with all of the other young people. Well, we came home from church that day, and my mother said, "What was going on in the balcony today?" And I'm like, did she have eyes in the back
Was there
of
some
her
cutting
head?
up going on maybe?
There was some cutting up going on. And so I said nothing, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "When every eye in the choir loft is focused on the balcony, I can tell that something is going on." So the next Wednesday night, I found myself at choir practice because I was not going to be sitting in the balcony anymore.
No, and guess whose eyes were on you the whole time? The entire
But
congregation.
that was such a wonderful blessing for me because I got to know the adults that were in the choir.
Sure.
And I got to know them. They liked having someone young in the choir, and they joked and they teased, and so I really got to know a lot of those guys so personally. And I wasn't the only one. We had quite a few people that were wonderful singers at that time that were in chorus, and they kind of joined in the choir pretty soon too.
And there's nothing like being a part of a church choir. I mean, it's just something special about it. I've been a part
We
of
have
a
a great
few,
fellowship,
and it's
yes.
there's just something just great about it. And you just can't describe it unless you've ever done it. And it's just the way you worship, just the singing the song, the fellowship that you have with your fellow choir members. Even if you might get off on a note here or there, but everybody's always covering. And it's so great. You do a rehearsal and it's always like, oh my gosh, we're never gonna. And then you get in worship and it just seems to all come together.
Right.
And that's what's so great about it.
And what's also great about choirs, especially our choir, and I'm not just saying that because I'm the pastor there, but there's just that collegiality, the humor and the love, the laughter, and even the willingness to allow bad singers to come in. When they let me come in, and they just look at me and go, "Oh, bless your heart." Marty's laughing because she knows it's true.
Just do the old Barney Fife. They put the record on behind, you just lip sync.
Exactly, but no, that's what I love about choirs is that there's that love, there's the dedication to not just the church as an institution, but to the worship and to glorify God and all that they do. And so it's a pleasure to me because this is the first time I've had a choir in any of the churches I've really been at that's so stable, and so it's a blessing to hear them. And
sure it is, and we must say too, Shannon, you've been here now. How long as pastor?
5 months, I think.
5 months, yeah. And but there's an excitement and energy, a buzz about Ogden Memorial United Methodist Church that it seems like it's had a little bit of revival since you've been there, and what a nice time to celebrate this 200th birthday. When really your congregation and you guys really got a lot of good things going on. So
I appreciate
we
that.
certainly want to invite.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that.
Everyone, to come and be a part of our fellowship. We would love to have new people, new faces, and
it might be just a good time for someone that's just curious whether they've been to a church or not been to church to maybe attend and see this neat presentation that you're going to have, and then just have some fellowship and then see where it goes. It's really neat to see, and you guys have all kinds of activities. You have, of course, you have Sunday morning worship.
Then we've got our Kids for Christ on Wednesdays, which is our after-school program that Marty is one of our leaders of, and I help with the teaching. It's a great time to really invest in our children's lives, and then we have youth at that evening, and then we got some Bible studies that prop up throughout the week. Susan Travis's is Wednesdays at 9 a.m. I teach one tonight at 6:30. We've been talking a lot about Methodism, about what does it mean to Methodist. So if this has inspired you, come on out tonight at 6:30. And so, God is good. And I appreciate what you said. It's not about me. It's not about anything. It's not me. It's the church.
Sure.
And so, but there's something up, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and it's nice to see what happens when God's people get all together and just start working together, and just good things seem to happen. And that seems what's going on right now at Ogden, and we're just so happy for you. Congratulations. 200 years is a long time.
It's a long time.
And you have a lot to celebrate, and a rich tradition for sure. Do we have more? We've got another 10 minutes where we can talk some more. I think I'm.
Are
you talked
covered.
out?
Well, I don't know that I've ever talked
I was going to say, are you really ever talked out?
I tell you what I can appreciate, and I want to spread this story on myself. I'm glad she told the balcony story, because I was my senior year in high school. Miss Pressler was out at the high school still with the library, and I was her library aide.
Yes.
Loose aide, so to speak.
Were you actually ever in the library?
I never seemed to find the library.
I loved to run my errands. I would kind of save up things that I needed to have done, like go put these in the mailboxes and things like that.
I just seemed to never return. So finally, about halfway through the year,
We're peas in a pod.
She goes, I really appreciate what you've done for me, but I think you might be better off in this class. So marriage and family was my next destination. So I think it was Miss McCormick. So anyway, the library aide didn't work out, but she was always very gracious. But it was good to know that she had a few of those times herself. She might have been a little bit younger than me. So, but what a pleasure. Thank you all for coming in today.
Thank you for this opportunity.
And just best wishes on your celebrations and everything that you have going on. A lot of exciting things going on. So, folks, if you're curious, want to be a part of it, check out Ogden Memorial United Methodist Church. They're 200 years old, and that's wonderful. So thank you all. Have a wonderful Monday, and good luck with all your celebrations. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of Tiger Talk here on your hometown radio station, 103.3 FM and 1580 AM. We're about 8 minutes away from the top of the hour. My thanks to Martha Pressler and Reverend Shannon Blosser of Ogden Memorial United Methodist Church. They are having their 200th anniversary kickoff celebration on November the 5th out at the gravesite of Benjamin Ogden, and that's located out at 208 Dogwood Lane. They're going to have a time of fellowship as well out at the home of Miss Margaret Davis. So congratulations. All right, that's going to do it for us. Everybody have a wonderful Monday. Thanks for listening to Tiger Talk, your local source for information